There's a verse in the first chapter of Habakkuk, verse 13, which is used to say that God can't even look upon our sin, our iniquities. When you read that verse, he says, you are so pure, so clean of eyes, that you can't even see our toil and our trouble. And yet, why do you? Why do you look upon us? See, that verse is used in ways to say that God can't even tolerate or be near us because of our sin, that he can't even look upon it. But that's not what the verse says when we take the whole verse. And this gives us this concept, when we take only that first part of it, gives us a concept of God being distant and far, and that he can't even look upon us because we're such a mess. And so we live with this concept of ourselves as enemies, as antagonistic to God. And it's true, people do live that way. But we need to look and see, what is the cause of that and the root of that? Is it God saying, you are so messed up I can't even look at you? Or is it something else? And we can find this. We can find where this is, where we can find the answer to that question. How does God look at us or not look at us? Is he recoiling in horror because of our sin and our iniquity, because of our mistakes, because of our failure to live up to righteousness? Well, let's look at just one verse that helps us to explore this topic, helps us to see God's heart. On Monday's video, I was in Colossians 1. We're going to go back to Colossians 1. And I wanted to read the next verses after the verses that we covered then, verses, I think it was 9 and 10. But we'll come back to those. There's tons of good stuff in there. But let's drop down to just one verse, is verse 21. We've done the verses after about you being holy and blameless, above reproach in his sight. But notice what he says, what the Apostle Paul says and shows to us in verse 21. He says, and this is breaking into the middle of a thought, but there's a thought captured in this verse that's really important. Is God put off by your sin? Is he hiding his face from you? Notice what this says. And he says, verse 21, Colossians 1, and you who once were. This is a past tense. This is something he says, this is what you were, not what you are now. In fact, there's a but or a yet that comes later in the verse, that this is comparing to and showing there's a change. Something has changed. So he says, this is what you once were. He said you once were alienated and enemies. So you once lived in this separation and as an enemy, antagonistic, contrary. He says, this is what you did. But keep reading, because the next words are vitally important. He said, you who at one time were alienated and enemies in your mind by wicked works. Now, the wicked works didn't create the mindset. In fact, that word by could be in or through. So he is saying, he is exposing the delusion, the lie that we have lived with, that we were alienated, separated from God, that we were his enemies in our own minds. We thought of ourselves that way. This is critically important, because if you think that's who you are, you're going to act that way. When you see yourself and believe yourself to be separate, disconnected from God, it only makes sense that you're going to live as if you are separate and disconnected from God. And the Apostle Paul here, Colossians 1:21, and in this whole section, is trying to show God's view of you is not that you are alienated, separated, that you are not his enemy. That is not his perspective. That was your perspective. Because he goes on, you were alienated and an enemy in your mind, in wicked works, but now, this is where the change is. This is what difference is. Now, he has reconciled you. He has brought you in and made you one and revealed and exposed and shown that you have union, oneness with him. That's what that word reconciled means, to be brought back in to this oneness. What did he change? He changed your mind. You have to get this, because if in your mind you see separate, enemy, never worthy, never good enough, you will live that way. But if you hear him, he says, you are my beloved child. Come to me. I have never left you. I have never wandered away. I have always been here and always will. Nothing can separate you from me. You are my beloved, in whom I am well pleased.